In today's video, we are diving into a few things you might not know about the DJI Neo. Now, I've been getting asked a ton of questions about this little drone, so alongside sharing some of the tips and tricks I've discovered since I started flying this drone, I am also going to be answering some of the most frequently asked questions. Let's jump right in. Now, one of the most common questions I'm being asked is, can you adjust the image sharpness setting when flying with only your smartphone? Now, out of the box, the footage that the Neo captures has quite an over-sharpened look to it. The footage looks very digital. Now, you can massively improve the video quality by reducing some of that over-sharpened look, and you can do this when the Neo is paired to a controller such as the DJI RC-N3 or even the RC2 controller. That's the controller with the screen built in. By going to the camera settings and then under the Style tab, there is a drop down where you can reduce the sharpness setting, and this makes the footage look a lot more natural and pleasing to the eye. But unfortunately, if you're flying with your smartphone only, or even if you're just using the Neo by itself, you cannot adjust that image sharpness setting. So you're stuck with getting this over sharpened footage from the Neo. Now, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't have the ability to change the image sharpness when flying with the smartphone only, so hopefully this is a setting DJI will add with a future firmware update. Now, another great question I got asked about this is, if you update the sharpness setting using the controller, does this then get saved so that that setting is used when flying with no controller at all? Now, I actually went out and tested this. I initially captured a clip with the Neo by itself. Then I quickly connected the RC2 controller to it and updated the sharpness setting to -2 before disconnecting it again and capturing another clip with the Neo only. Now, if I put these clips side by side on screen now, you can see that in terms of sharpness, they are the same. So what that means is, in my testing, that sharpness setting that you set when using the controller does not get saved. It reverts back to the default setting whenever you're using the Neo by itself or the Neo paired to your smartphone. Now, with that being said, the sharpness setting you set when using the controller does get remembered. So even though that setting doesn't get saved to the Neo so that the Neo uses it when you're using it by itself, if you connect the controller again at a future point, the sharpness setting you have set does get remembered. You don't need to keep setting it each time, but it only applies when you are flying with that controller. Now, just quickly before moving on, if you're getting value from this video, please let me know by giving me the thumbs up and clicking that like button down below. And if you love all things drones, but also action cameras, gimbals and more, and want to learn about the best settings to get up and running quickly, along with tips and tricks to help you get more cinematic videos and better looking images with your gear, then please consider clicking that subscribe button down below. And when you're down there, be sure to check the notification bell so that you will be alerted when my new videos are released. It would be greatly appreciated. Now, the answer to the next question is absolutely critical to know, in my opinion, if you want to have safe flights with the DJI Neo. Now, I was asked, does return to home work when flying with no controller or the smartphone? Now, if you're a beginner and don't know what return to home is, it's a function that DJI drones have that allow them to automatically rise up in the air, fly back to above where you took it off from and land in the event of a signal loss between the controller and the drone or a low battery, for example. It's a safety functionality. But something that's absolutely critical to know, if you're flying the Neo by itself or the Neo paired with your smartphone, there is no return to home functionality. Instead, what will happen if you lose signal between your smartphone and the Neo, for example, is the Neo will simply hover in place in the air. Now, this may be okay if you can physically walk closer to the Neo itself, at which point your smartphone will regain connection to it and you can continue flying it or landing it. But what happens, for example, if you can't physically get closer to the Neo and you've lost connection to it and it's hovering in place in the air? Well, in that instance, all that happens is the Neo will continue hovering there until its battery gets critically low, at which point it will automatically lower to the ground and land. So you need to be very cautious of this. If, for example, you're flying the Neo with your smartphone and it's out over water and you lose connection to it, that Neo is simply going to hover there until the battery gets low, and then it will lower and land in the water, which will be a disaster. So you need to be very, very careful about losing signal to the drone whenever you're flying it with the smartphone only. With that being said, return to home does work whenever you fly the Neo with a controller such as the DJI RC-N3, RC2, or the FPV options such as the Motion Controller 3 or the FPV Remote Controller 3. In those instances, if you lose connection to the Neo, return to home will engage and it will return back to where you took it off from. Now, another question I see commonly being asked is, can you change the Neo's quick shot mode while it's hovering in the air? And the answer is yes. Now, there's two ways you can do this. Firstly, if you have your smartphone paired with the Neo, you can press this red stop button on the screen and the Neo will stop its current quick shot mode and hover in place. And then using this mode drop down, you can select a new quick shot mode. Once you have selected this mode, you can press this green start button and now the Neo will start to perform this new quick shot. Now this is quite useful because it means if you want to capture a couple of different quick shots, instead of having to land the Neo and change the mode on top of it before palm launching it again each time, by changing the quick shot mode while it's hovering in the air, this can save time and save battery. Now there is a second way that you can do this, and that is by using voice commands. So if you press this voice commands button here on the smartphone app screen, you can then speak the quick shot you want the Neo to change into, and after a few seconds it will have changed into that mode and have started to perform that move. Now on screen now I'm going to put a list of all the different quick shot voice commands you can give the Neo, so feel free to make a note of these. Now by far one of the most common questions I see being asked about the Neo is, does it always have to fly behind you when it's tracking you? Now if you use the follow mode, which is the first quick shot mode you can select on the top of the Neo, when you palm launch the drone it will always move around to fly behind you. So if you launch it in front of yourself, for example, in follow mode, once it's worked out your orientation after a few seconds, it will automatically fly around to behind you, and that's where it will stay as it follows you. But what if you want to get a different perspective or capture yourself from a different orientation? Well, thankfully there is another mode called Direction Track that you can use to do this. Now by default, Direction Track is not set. If you look at the top of the Neo, the 6th quickshot mode is called Custom, and this allows you to select a couple of different modes for this option. And you can select what happens when you use this custom mode in the smartphone app settings. So if you go to the settings and click into the custom option, you can see we have a few to choose from. Now if you select Direction Track, now when you select that custom mode on the top of the Neo and you palm launch the drone will stay in whatever orientation you took it off from as it tracks you. So if you want to get a shot where the Neo flies along beside you, for example, you could select this custom quick shot mode that we have set to Direction Track, launch the Neo to the side of yourself, and now as you start to walk or run, the Neo will fly along next to you. Now, I actually demonstrated this feature in a previous video where I had the Neo flying in front of me using Direction Track, and a really good question I got asked is, how do you actually then palm land the Neo? Because as you walk towards it, it's continually flying away from you, so you can't catch up to it to put your palm underneath it. Now, don't worry, it's actually really straightforward. Once you're ready to land the Neo, all you have to do is stand still for 3 seconds with your palm out in front of you. The Neo will automatically recognize this, and then it will fly back above your palm and land on it. It's that simple. Now, something that caught me out recently, and I think is crucial to know, is the fact that the DJI Neo does not have turtle mode. Now, turtle mode was a feature introduced on the first Avata and is available on the Avata 2. That means if you crash the drone and it lands upside down away from you, you could simply activate turtle mode, which would automatically flip the drone the right way up so that you could take it back off and continue flying. Now, as mentioned, this actually has caught me out recently. I was flying the Neo FPV in full manual mode and I was doing flips and rolls with it. Now, I'll be completely honest, I'm quite rusty at flying fully manual, and when doing a flip, I managed to crash the Neo. Now, it landed quite a distance away from me and in an area of tall grass, but to make matters worse, it flipped upside down in the process, meaning I couldn't take it off. Now, with the Avata 2, all you would have to do is turn on turtle mode, which would flip the drone the right way up, and then you could take it off and fly it back to you. But when I went looking for turtle mode with the Neo, it's nowhere to be found because the Neo doesn't have the turtle mode functionality. In the end, instead we had to sprint over to the area we seen the Neo crash, and we spent a long time looking for it because it had fallen down into that tall grass. It was really hard to find. Now, a feature that really helped us out in this situation was another one called flashing and beeping. If you go to the settings menu when flying FPV, if you select the flashing and beeping option, this will start the Neo making a beeping sound. Now, because we knew we were in the rough area that the Neo had crashed but couldn't quite see it, by turning on this flashing and beeping option, it meant we could audibly hear where it was, and this helped us locate it so much faster. So this is another setting worth knowing about. Now, another question I've been asked quite a lot is, if you're flying the Neo with the smartphone app, do you have manual video controls? And the answer is, unfortunately, no. When flying the Neo using your smartphone, the camera is in auto exposure mode. So settings like ISO and shutter speed are unavailable for you to control manually. We don't even get the option to lock the exposure. So this means as you fly the Neo around, the exposure will be constantly changing. And in some situations, this doesn't look very good. Now, again, I hope this is a feature that DJI add with a future firmware update. I see no reason we shouldn't be able to lock the exposure, much like how we can when flying it with a controller by pressing and holding on the screen itself. Now, something else that's worth being aware of is if you're flying the Neo by itself at nighttime, it won't actually take off your palm. Now, the reason for this is the Neo needs to see your face before it will automatically take off. It needs to recognize the subject it will be tracking. So even if you try to take it off at daytime but have it pointed away from you, it won't actually take off your palm. But if you try doing this at nighttime, because the camera is so dark, it won't actually be able to recognize or see you, and therefore it will not take off. With that being said, the low light and nighttime footage from the Neo is so poor anyway, you probably wouldn't want to be using it at nighttime. Now, while we're talking about video quality, I want to give a quick shout out to another awesome drone channel, Drone Ando. They recently posted a fantastic comparison of the Neo's footage against other DJI models such as the Mini 2, Mini 4 and Air 3. So if you're curious about how the Neo stacks up, definitely check out their video and I'll link it in the description down below. Something else that will come in really useful when you're using the Neo is if you go to start a quick shot by pressing and holding the mode button for 2 seconds on the top of the Neo itself, but when it audibly reads out the quick shot mode that's about to start, you realize you've selected the wrong one. Instead of having it take off and then you immediately put your palm back under and land it and then change to the correct quick shot mode, wasting battery, you can actually cancel the quick shot before it even takes off. To do this, it's actually really straightforward. Once you start the quick shot mode by pressing and holding that mode button on the top of the Neo, you have until the drone actually takes off to cancel that quick shot, and you can do it by simply pressing the mode button once on the top of the Neo, and the Neo will stop and no longer take off and perform that quick shot, allowing you to then change to the correct one. Controller wise, a question I am seeing getting asked quite a lot is, can you fly the Neo with the DJI RC2? That's a controller with the screen built in. And the answer is, yes we can. To do this, all you have to do with the Neo and the RC2 controller both powered on is go to the connection guide option on the bottom right of the controller screen and then select the DJI Neo from it. Now, if you don't see the DJI Neo on this list, all you have to do is update the firmware of the controller itself. Now, once you select this option, after a few seconds, the controller should automatically pair to your Neo. But if this is the first time you're doing this, you may have to go through a few additional steps. And this involves pressing the unable to connect to aircraft button that appears at the bottom of the controller screen, and then press the pair button on the following page, which will start the RC2 making a beeping sound. Finally, you have to press and hold the power button on the Neo for 3 seconds until it starts beeping, and after a few seconds, both devices will have paired, allowing you to fly the Neo with the RC2 controller. And this is actually my preferred way for flying it manually. So there you have it, a few things that nobody tells you about the DJI Neo, including answering some of the most common questions I've been getting asked about this little drone. Don't forget, if you have learned something new, I would really appreciate it if you gave this video a like down below. And if you love all things drones, but also action cameras, gimbals and more, and want to learn how to get better images and more cinematic videos with your gear, then I recommend you click that subscribe and notification bell button down below so that you will be alerted when my new videos are released. Now, if you want to learn even more about the DJI Neo, then here is a complete beginner's guide going in depth about all the features of this drone that you can watch by clicking up here or by clicking the link in the description down below.